Major support for these broadcasts is provided by the CUNY TV Foundation, New York Community Bank, Kilroy Architectural Windows, New York's window company, Capital One Bank, Perfect Building Maintenance, Chase Commercial Term Lending, Geneva Burns, Tomasi and Webster, M&T Bank, the Wickoff Group, Chelsea Lighting, Greenberg Traurig, LLP. Additional support is provided by Ackman Ziff Real Estate, AKA Hotels, Corman Communities, Bank of America, Merrill Lynch, Bank Leumi, USA, Briarwood Organization, CBRE, Colliers International, NYC, Cushman & Wakefield, DDG, Douglaston Development, Levine Builders, Dime Savings Bank of Williamsburg, Eastern Union Funding, Flushing Bank, Friedman LLP, Herrick Feinstein LLP, Hersha Hospitality Trust, Investors Bank, New Banks, James D. Kuhn Real Estate Center at Syracuse University, James Orphanides, Centurion Holdings, John Katzimatidis, Red Apple Group, Margolin Weiner and Evans, Madison Realty Capital, Meridian Capital Group, Newmark Grubb Knight Frank, Popular Community Bank, SJP Properties, Sterling & Sterling, Stonehenge Partners, Urban American, and these friends.
They call it Newark. It's in the Garden State. It's the largest city in the state of New Jersey. And there are a lot of things taking place in Newark. And for that reason, I'm doing a double show today on what's happening in Newark. But I don't really know everything that's happening in Newark. So I've assembled 4 people who are really involved with major developments and things taking place in Newark. My guests, they include Stephen J. Pizicki, who's the chairman and CEO of SJP Properties. Frank Tomasi, who is the senior partner at the law firm of Genova, Burns, Tomasi and Webster. Miles Berger, who is the president and CEO of the Berger Organization. And last but not least, you need the banker always on a show, and you need a great banker, my friend Kevin Cummings, who is the president and CEO of Investors Bank. So Frank, you grew up in Newark, so what was it like in the Ironbound section?
I was born in the Ironbound section in '55, so I'm a product of the public grammar and high school. I graduated Eastside High School, Mike, in 1968.
What were the riots?
That's it, Mike. The '67 summer of discontent was a disturbance that caused an evacuation of Newark. Remember, Mike, in 1966, the city was very proud that it had declared that it had 415 inhabitants. By 1976, the population was down to half, and it fell as low as 210,000.
So from 415,000 to 210,000.
Yeah.
And so what happened? People left?
The riots scared people. The Weequahic section, which was an all-Jewish section, evaporated. It went to Milburn. It went to Livingston. The North Ward section, that was all Italian and a real strong, rich Italian section, went to Belleville, kept going west. It went to Cedar Grove. It found its way to East Hanover.
How the Ironbound section survived?
As the Ironbound Italians, because it was an Italian section in the early 60s and in the 50s, as it evaporated and disappeared, there was a revolution in Portugal in '74. It was when Portugal went communist. People don't remember. Portugal was a Western European company that went communist. The people that had money, and that's who came, the Portuguese population that came, they were merchants, they were businessmen. They came with the legendary suitcases full of their life's savings. And they found their way to a port town. They found their way to the Ironbound section of Newark. And as the Italian, Irish, Polish population dissipated, we had this enormous influx of Portuguese. The Ironbound section was, and still is, known as, a walled-off section. It's surrounded on every side by railroad tracks. So it's isolated. It's a little bit of a utopia in Newark. And that's what happened. They infiltrated. They lived there. and it became a cultural ghetto of Portuguese and Spanish people.
So how does a guy who was living in Riverdale, New York, aka the Bronx, Miles Berger, a 24-year-old kid, end up in Newark? 1976?
Well, we were strictly at that time in the hotel business. My father and his brother, who started our company, had several hotels in their portfolio, plus a group of rooming houses, what we call in New York City rooming houses, or SROs, in the Bronx and Queens and Manhattan. And I was told to go out and look to buy a motel. So I would look in the Sunday New York Times in the hotel motels for sale section, and I saw Holiday Inn for sale, Broad Street, Newark, New Jersey. I made my way out there the following day on a Monday morning. I remember the ground was snow covered, and I get to this beautiful Holiday Inn with the driveways closed off with telephone poles, large poles blocking the access, and I couldn't believe that the Holiday Inn franchise would close down and be closed up. I came to learn that it was for sale by the bank, which was actually an insurance company, New England Mutual. And 2 to 3 weeks later, I was at their offices in Boston, and we made an offer, and we really bought it at a very low price.
So when you bought this in what, 76?
76.
So the riots was 67.
Yep.
What was Newark like in 76 when you opened up a hotel?
Rough. Crime was higher in those days than it is now. And there was just, even the downtown, I mean, that area of Broad Street, right across from Broad Street Station, is relatively safe, was relatively safe in the daytime, but at night it was a rough area.
So what happened? When did S. Klein, when did Haynes, when did Bamberger's, when did all of these retailers, because this was, when did they leave Newark to make it destitute?
I went to graduate school at Rutgers in 76, 77, and they were all gone then.
Yes.
Haynes closed around
Yeah.
78. I was in
Was it?
law school, and it was. I still could go there, but it closed while I was in law school.
But Steve, you know, you've been involved with development in the state of New Jersey. I mean, you've been born and bred in New Jersey. You've been a visionary in Jersey City, Hoboken, Parsippany, or other places. You know, why didn't you ever go to Newark until 2012?
Well, again, we follow the corporate world, and the corporate world is kind of funny. In the very early days of our career, so 30 years ago, when we picked somebody up coming from Europe, the first thing they did is they had a map, and they kind of had circles around Newark. And they circled it for a very good reason. Most of the highways intersected there. Mass transit was there. Path was already there. They figured this is a natural. All of them do studies on neighborhoods before they finally make a move. And when they did the studies and discovered what, you know, what had occurred after the riots and the fear, they took it off their list. But I think today, that's what's pushing Newark back. Mass transit's everything. You know, the better you can access your offices, particularly with mass transit, the better employee base you'll have, the broader employee pool you'll have to choose from. And Newark has PATH. It has the main Boston-Washington line with all the stops. It's got light rail.
But I want to go back a little bit because as a banker, I mean, you became a banker later on in life after a successful career as a partner at KPMG. All of the banks were headquartered in Newark. When did the banks leave?
And they left in the same time period, late 70s, early 80s. The Gateway won KPMG, Pete Marwick at the time, in 1980 moved out to Short Hills. So the only really corporate person or group that was there was the Prudential.
But in essence, didn't Prudential even move to Newark? They left Newark. They went to Short Hills also.
The bulk of their functions stayed in Newark. They stayed committed to Newark.
What made the beginning of Newark in the last, let's say, last 15 to 18 years? What's changed?
So it's a very reasonable buy-in. when land gets tight and you know, New York gets expensive and Hoboken gets developed and the things that Steve has done in Jersey City, you have to go somewhere and you want to stay on that line, that direct shot in. Newark became a reasonable buy-in. You know, Newark is not a rental town. You don't make it on cash flow. You make it in Newark on equity appreciation. It's not a place where your rents are high. It's a place where you need subsidies, and I guess we're going to talk about that at some point in time, Mike. But if you get the subsidies and you can afford to build and you compensate for that drop in rent, Newark is your place to build right.
The same thing that made Newark great 100 years ago is what will make it great again over the next decade, and that is its location. Its proximity to New York City, the highway system, the airport, the trains, the rail, and its location in the region. That will make Newark great. It will overcome all of the problems that it has through that demand that's generated by the location.
Now, would you say that it was Ray Chambers and the people at Prudential who really helped the resurrection of Newark in the last 20 years?
In my opinion, Newark could be called Prudential Town. If DuPont is to Delaware and you know, Steel was to Pittsburgh, Prudential is to Newark. The Prudential Arena, that's where we play basketball, that's where we play hockey. The New Jersey Performing Arts Center, the biggest sign on it is Prudential Hall. Prudential never abandoned Newark, and throughout all the bad times, the chairman of the board came to work in Newark every day, and people don't understand that. It's not just symbolic, it's actually iconic that through all the down years, chairman of the board of Prudential worldwide came to Newark every day, sat there. And it's you know, it's also systematically participated in throughout the entire resurgence and redevelopment of Newark, whatever it could touch, whenever it could help, from foundation side to investment to lending. I mean, the gateways were financed and built by Prudential. So it's a Pru town, and that's a good thing. It's not a bad thing.
Now, how did the PAC get created, the New Jersey Performing Arts Center?
I can tell you. Two men, Ray Chambers and the late Robert Van Fossen, who was the chairman of the board of Mutual Benefit Life, which of course is no more. They got together. They were the two leaders. Between the two, I think they guaranteed the first $30 million, if my memory is correct. And based on that, they went forward with a capital plan to raise money. They got some grants from the state. The rest was all private. And it was through their leadership that the NJPAC got built.
Okay, so the PAC was the first.
Yeah.
I mean, I hadn't been to the PAC maybe once, and I was there in December, and I was blown away. I had never seen such a magnificent facility. I mean, it was great. It was the event for Murray Kushner, and it was just a fantastic location. Everything was wonderful over there. How did the Prudential Center arrive?
It was created by the city saying that they were going to they monetized those payments from the Port Authority, and they said, we'll contribute in the investment, in the participation with the Devils to build the arena. So the arena got built with fresh capital from the Devils, but Newark has an investment of $200 million.
Now, the only problem is that what they missed is look what happened in Brooklyn with the Brooklyn Nets over here. I mean, they could have had both teams, right?
Well, they had the Nets for a while, and if I had to bet dollars to donuts, they'll get another basketball franchise back, because the Nets proved while they were in Newark that you could draw. They sold out every Lakers game. They sold out every Heat game. You know, there are some franchises that I'm aware of that can't sell out when the Heat come into town or when Boston comes into town. So Newark can do it. It proved.
How does a bank like Investors, who is really the last 6 or 7 years under you and Dominic, and the growth that you've done has been fantastic. How did you, I know you took over a bank, how do you see the banking in Newark?
Well, with banks headquartered in New Jersey, we have the most branches. We have 4 branches in Newark, 3 in the Ironbound and 1 on the west side of town. I mean, there's communities. You look at them and you look at each individual community, and there's certainly opportunities. On the north side, branching out towards Belleville and the north side, northwest side of Newark, there's potential branch locations. In the center of town, in the business district, there's opportunities. Not much land around, but we've looked at a couple locations over the times, and getting a drive up in that central business district is an issue for us.
Frank brought up something which I've always brought up with regard to incentives. Incentives have helped many companies in the state of New Jersey, and perhaps more important in the city of Newark. Panasonic, why'd they come to Newark?
Joe Taylor heads up North America. He feels very strong that their whole company is going well beyond what we think of Panasonic as TVs. They're going into all kinds of environmental, equipment, technology.
They're in healthcare also.
So they felt if they're going to profit off of that business, they might as well be really at the ultimate green location. And as you look at, lead points, green technology, mass transit.
For my uneducated people, explain what LEED means. People hear this, they hear LEED Gold, LEED Platinum, but what is it? What does LEED mean?
Well, it's an organization in Washington that kind of came up with a rating system to try to encourage people to build in a more efficient, technologically more advanced way, and I think it's helped. I think anything in that area is going to help, and so.
How do you get something LEED certified?
So what's the if you think about it, the thing that really triggers something that's environmentally friendly is not driving your cars all around. So why does the Rock fill up when other cities in maybe safer areas don't? It's because, and if you look at it's beyond the games, it's the concerts, it's everything.
Oh, yeah.
It's very easy for almost anyone in New Jersey to get on the train, and they get off at Penn Station, walk a couple blocks, and they're at the arena. They go back, and there are restaurants and bars happening. There is street life, especially when there's major things going on at the Rock, and that's really what fires up, the ability for Newark to come back. Newark has, although it went through all the things we talked about, it really has great infrastructure. It's a city. It was built as a city to be able to, the streets are, Broad Street. We have major interstates that are smaller than Broad Street. So I think it has incredible capacity and incredible infrastructure and mass transit. So that's really what's green. And then we certainly, Panasonic has gone beyond that, and the building will be LEED Gold, and the interior will be LEED Platinum. So, we'll be more energy efficient. I think the benefits, like we spoke about earlier, are really the health and well-being and productivity of the employees.
And as you were saying, the younger generation is very geared to environmental and to these LEED certifications and all the other things for the filtration and other.
Yeah, I think that companies like Panasonic see they're not a lot of companies operate like tomorrow's the last day of the world. Panasonic is thinking long term. Panasonic is changing direction globally, and they want to attract the brightest and the best. And if you want to attract the brightest and the best, they're smart enough to understand. I could be in a building where, literally I'm getting sick so many times a year because of the air quality. Or I could be in a building that, filters the air so much that, I'm not going to be absent that much. I'm not going to miss that many days of work. So that's a big thing for a company. I'm going to attract these people who do read and try to understand, what's going on with, environmentally friendly things like buildings that are green. So I think Panasonic saw it as a way to, attract employees, retain them, have them be more productive.
Here's a big question. A lot of companies can move into a neighborhood. Will the employees who work for Panasonic move into Newark?
I mean, Joe Taylor is committed to move to Newark himself. He said to his employees that if I'm going to ask you to work in Newark, I'm going to have a place in Newark.
Maybe Joe Taylor is one, and that's maybe 300 employees or 400 employees. 400 employees don't make it. How do you get these companies? Because companies have been in Newark. They've been here. Okay, Gateway has had a lot of companies in there. How do they keep and attract people to make Newark revive, a true revival? Miles, you've been there for 36 years right
People
now.
have to feel safe. I think one of Newark's worst problems is the perception of crime, more so than the reality of crime. The crime rate in Newark under the Booker administration has dropped significantly in the past 4 years. I think people are feeling safer, and I think as the new generation grows up and the older generation that remembers the riots moves south to Florida and different areas, that perception is changing.
Newark is the home of five major educational facilities.
Right.
It's the home of one of a very good hospital. I mean, you have the infrastructure. You have law school over there. You have, UMDMJ. You have a variety of situations over there. But in order to make a city, it's like Lower Manhattan. If we have to utilize the same idea, Lower Manhattan had to become a 24/7 community. These urban tax credits to get Panasonic, to get other companies move in there, Wakefern, and all the rest. But what we also need is you have obsolete buildings in the city of Newark, like we had in Lower Manhattan. And what they did in Lower Manhattan in the 90s, Giuliani, they came out with something called a 421G. And a 421G was a full tax abatement if you took that office building, which was not LEED certified. There's no chance it could ever be a LEED anything. They took that office building and they converted it into residential. They tried that in Newark with a couple of buildings. Will they give incentives, or do you see, Frank or anyone, a creation of incentives to go to landlords or owners like a Steve Pizicki or a Miles Berger and saying, hey, here's the building, you won't have to pay real estate taxes, so this way you can make it more feasible?
It's a little bit difficult to do that in New Jersey because the municipalities don't have independent taxing authority. New York City can tax and can do things that New Jersey you can't. In New Jersey, it's state tax and that's it. So it's a great concept. We have what's called pilot programs, which you're familiar with, that incentivize your investment in residential.
But maybe Miles' buildings, his office buildings, are leased to capacity. But I can walk into Newark, and I have a lot of vacant buildings. It's great that Panasonic's going to move there. It's great that we have a PAC. It's great that you have the Prudential Center. Dinosaur Barbecue opened up here. It's wonderful. But we have to have people living there.
Well, I think you will. I think, urban centers are hot. I mean, it's not just New York City. Everybody on the globe knows that's hot. But New Brunswick, New Jersey is incredibly, you see the changes of being a banker and seeing what's going on in New Brunswick, New Jersey. It's becoming Rutgers College town. It's got great restaurants. It's doing well. Hoboken, New Jersey, Jersey City. So why leave out a place like Newark when you have the university population you have, and you have the mass transit situation you have, and all the other things we talked about. And now, it doesn't start always with a rush. Panasonic comes. So that's buttresses the gateway area. We talked about Prue, kind of buttressing the north end of downtown.
Because Prue is building their new world headquarters, right?
Well, if you think about it, you got the PAC kind of, buttressing the north end, the northwest end. You've got the Rock on the south side of the business district. You got Prudential's world headquarters, pretty much in that area of Broad Street. And now Prue has committed to build a building across from Military Park and really connect back to the university system. So now you kind of have, you know, you have your downtown well-defined, and there's
How
some,
big is the new Prue building going to be?
the new Prue building would be about 750,000 feet, 2,800 high-paying jobs in Newark. What could be better than that?
And they will be all occupying the building, they'll 100% tenant.
That's their world investment headquarters, not the headquarters of the company, but their investment headquarters, which is, you know, a very successful operation. And to have just those 2,800 jobs, how many jobs do you think that you know, we know we're going to have almost 1,000 construction employees there. And so I think as you have the offices kind of come first, now people are looking there. Like Frank said, the Ironbound section, you can't find an apartment.
Yeah.
No,
You can't find the condo.
If you look at it this way,
Ironbound
Frank's
section.
partner, Angela, you know, was a visionary, and they moved from the suburbs to Newark. I mean, how many years ago? I mean, this is...
And I'll tell you a phenomenon that we're experiencing, Michael. 10 of our last 15 hired lawyers, okay, do not have cars. It's a phenomenon.
Not every young person's going to have a car.
Right.
That's clear.
Are they living in Hoboken? Or?
They're living in New York City, Hoboken, Jersey City, and Newark. And now some are even starting to find their way to Harrison.
Right.
But it's all about, we have a big debt on our backs. We've come through an economic meltdown. We can't have cars, and so we need to live near public transportation. And it's people and lights that bring security. It's not really police that bring security. And as you put people into jobs, right? The building that we're in was abandoned for 6 years. Across the street from us, the building, the old Verizon, the original Verizon building, abandoned for 6 or 7 years. Now it's the Rutgers Business School. The lots that Steve is converting from Prudential, that site has been empty for 40 years. The Panasonic site, 25 years empty. You're going to put people, lights, activity. That's when the retail follows, and then people say, let's live here. There's something going on.
And Miles mentioned it. You know, it's the perception of crime. It's the perception of fear. And you take 2 city blocks that are right across the street from Military Park, probably one of the finest parks. You know, clearly everyone's compared it to the Renaissance that went on in Bryant Park. So clearly that is going to be, you know, no one uses it now. Prudential.
Maybe we'll even get a Shake Shack there.
You could get a Shake Shack there. I'm sure they're looking at it. So, and they are. And so I think that, you know, you know, these things are occurring when we still have a horrible economy. And I think as the economy starts to grow, and it will, you know, you can only hold it down so long. I think as it starts coming back, you know, we're building Pearson's headquarters in Hoboken. It's really the last big commercial site in Hoboken. Jersey City, you've got probably 6,000 apartment units coming on,
So it's,
taking up a lot of commercial sites. Frank said it. How do his employees get to work? They take mass transit. Why? If you live in New York or Hoboken, do you need a car?
We have to continue this next week, but we're in a perfect lead-in for the second part of the show, which will start next week. But I'd like to thank Steve Pizicki, Frank Giatomasi, Maz Berger, and Kevin Cummings. And we'll be back next week to talk about the true resurrection of what's happening in New York. See you next week.